for she never tried to grow better. She became more and more peevish and fretful every day, dissatisfied not only with what she had, but with all that was around her, and constantly wishing things in general to be different. She found fault with everything and everybody, and all that happened, and grew more and more disagreeable to everyone who had to do with her. At last, when she had nearly killed her nurse, and had all but succeeded in hanging herself, and was miserable from morning to night, her parents thought it time to do something. A long way from the palace, in the heart of a deep wood of pine trees, lived a wise woman. In some countries she would have been called a witch, but that would have been a mistake, for she never did anything wicked, and had more power than any witch could have. As her fame was spread through all the country, the king heard of her, and, thinking she might perhaps be able to suggest something, sent for her. In the dead of the night, lest the princess should know it, the king's messenger brought her into the palace, a tall woman, muffled from head to foot in a cloak of black cloth. In the presence of both their majesties, the king, to do her honour, requested her to sit, but she declined, and stood waiting to hear what they had to say. Nor had she to wait long, for almost instantly they began to tell her the dreadful trouble they were in with their only child, first the king talking, then the queen interposing with some yet more dreadful fact, and at times both letting out a torrent of words together. So anxious were they to show the wise woman that their perplexity was real, and their daughter a very terrible one. For a long while there appeared no sign of approaching pause, but the wise woman stood patiently folded in her black cloak, and listened without word or motion. At length silence fell, for they had talked themselves tired, and could not think of anything more to add to the list of their child's enormities. After a while the wise woman unfolded her arms, and her cloak, dropping open in front, disclosed a garment made of a strange stuff, which an old poet who knew her well has thus described: all lily white, withouten spot or pride, that seemed like silk and silver woven near, but neither silk nor silver therein did appear. How very badly you have treated her, said the wise woman. Poor child! Treated her badly, gasped the king. She is a very wicked child, said the queen, and both glared with indignation. Yes, indeed, returned the wise woman, she is very naughty indeed, and that she must be made to feel, but it is half your fault too. What? Stammered the king. Haven't we given her every mortal thing she wanted? Surely, said the wise woman. What else could have all but killed her? You should have given her a few things of the other sort, but you are far too dull to understand me. You are very polite, remarked the king, with royal sarcasm on his thin, straight lips. The wise woman made no answer beyond a deep sigh, and the king and queen sat silent also in their anger, glaring at the wise woman. The silence lasted again for a minute, and then the wise woman folded her cloak around her, and her shining garment vanished like the moon when a great cloud comes over her. Yet another minute passed, and the silence endured, for the smouldering wrath of the king and queen choked the channels of their speech. Then the wise woman turned her back on them, and so stood. At this the rage of the king broke forth, and he cried to the queen, stammering in his fierceness: How should such an old hag as that teach Rosamond good manners? She knows nothing of them herself. Look how she stands, actually with her back to us. At the word the wise woman walked from the room. The great folding doors fell to behind her, and the same moment the king and queen were quarrelling like apes as to which of them was to blame for her departure. Before their altercation was over, for it lasted till the early morning, in rushed Rosamond, clutching in her hand a poor little white rabbit, of which she was very fond, and from which, only because it would not come to her when she called it, she was pulling handfuls of fur in the attempt to tear the squealing, pink-eared, red-eyed thing to pieces. Rosamond! cried the queen, whereupon Rosamond threw the rabbit in her mother's face. The king started up in a fury, and ran to seize her. She darted shrieking from the room. The king rushed after her, but, to his amazement, she was nowhere to be seen. The huge hall was empty. No, just outside the door, close to the threshold, with her back to it, sat the figure of the wise woman, muffled in her dark cloak, with her hood bowed over her knees. As the king stood looking at her, she rose slowly, crossed the hall, and walked away down the marble staircase. The king called to her, but she never turned her head or gave the least sign that she heard him. So quietly did she pass down the wide marble stair that the king was all but persuaded he had seen only a shadow gliding across the white steps. For the princess, she was nowhere to be found. The queen went into hysterics, and the rabbit ran away. The king sent out messengers in every direction, but in vain. In a short time the palace was quiet as it used to be before the princess was born. The king and queen cried a little now and then, for the hearts of parents were in that country strangely fashioned, and yet I'm afraid the first movement of those very hearts would have been a jump of terror if the ears above them had heard the voice of Rosamond in one of the corridors. As for the rest of the household, they could not have made up a single tear amongst them. They thought, whatever it might be for the princess, it was, for everyone else, the best thing that could have happened, and as to what had become of her, if their heads were puzzled, their hearts took no interest in the question. The Lord Chancellor alone had an idea about it, but he was far too wise to utter it. End of chapter 1. Recording by Nathan at antipodeanwriter.wordpress.com.